Hi, everybody. Let's see, Tuesday, the 13th of October. It's almost 10 o'clock, and our Zoom session today, there was some problem with the recording. For some reason, it didn't register, didn't log. I don't know what to say or how to describe it. But so I'm going to do the lecture again from the Zoom session today, and we'll go over the material. So you'll have a record of the material we covered to review for exams or to go over if you didn't understand some of it. So we started out this morning by talking about strengths and deltas, which is a topic I've wanted to cover. And in pre-COVID days, the way we would do this is we often had guest speakers come to Com 105. And the guest speakers might give a presentation about some upcoming event sponsored by the Communication Studies Society or something like that. And often most of the time, these speakers were themselves comm majors, and they had taken Com 105, so they knew me and I knew them, blah, blah, blah. And what would happen is they would give their presentation, and then I would introduce to the students in Com 105 the concept of giving feedback, communication feedback. That is, feedback on someone's communication choices. And we would use the presentation as the basis for that. Well, okay, fair enough. So since we don't have a guest speaker, we'll just have to talk about the concept, which is what we did in class today. So the concept here is called strengths and deltas. Now here's what that means. Think about what feedback really is. Feedback really is simply you, or anyone, saying to someone else, I would like you to keep this behavior, or I would like you to consider changing or rethinking this behavior. That's all feedback really is. Now, we start getting into some territory like positive feedback, negative feedback, constructive feedback. That feedback wasn't particularly constructive. All that kind of talk about feedback. But really, all we're saying when we talk about feedback is, if I'm giving feedback, I'm giving you information about how I would suggest you consider changing your behavior, or I'm giving you some information about how and why I think you should consider keeping some behavior. So that's really all that's going on when we even talk about feedback. Well, to remove feedback from the realm of positive, negative, good, and bad, and all that sort of stuff, we use the concept in the Communication Studies Department of strengths and deltas. And that means that I issue strengths and deltas to you, or you issue it to me, or you issue it to anybody, or I issue it to anybody. When I say to someone, here's some specific behavior I noticed you performing. That's a strength. Keep it. Do that same behavior or enhance and amplify that behavior the next time you are in a similar communication situation, the next time you're giving a speech, the next time you're giving a speech on this topic. If the situation is a speech, public speaking kind of a situation. On the other hand, a delta is I'm encouraging you to change or rethink the behavior so that the next time you give a particular speech, you rethink this behavior that in this speech struck me as being worthy of being rethought. So, what does this look like in practice? Okay. The speech is just one example, by the way. You can give feedback in any kind of communication situation. You can give feedback to a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, spouse, loved one. It's complicated, friend with benefit, buddy, whatever. You can give feedback to anybody about anything that you want to call to their attention. But public speaking is just a really convenient and easy way to talk about this. So let's say that I give a speech, and let's say that my volume is quite low, and you can't hear what I'm saying Because my voice is really low. Because my voice is really low. And so you would give me some feedback. And you would say something along the following lines. When you gave your speech, the volume at which you spoke was such that it was difficult for me to hear all of the words that you were saying. And the next time you give a speech, I would encourage you to speak in a higher volume. Well, that's a delta. And it's called a delta because delta is the Greek letter that's used in chemistry and I guess other sciences to indicate change. So if you have a chemical equation and the equation represents bringing two chemicals together and then, a change occurs in one or both, that change is indicated by the Greek letter delta, which is essentially a triangle. And so to get away from, issues of positive and negative and constructive and all, we use the word delta to mean behavior that you would suggest someone considers changing or behavior you really, really, really would like someone to change. It's a delta. To give that information is issuing a delta. Strength, kind of the other side of the coin. Let's say that I give a speech and you particularly like the ideas I expressed. So the content of my speech, you really thought, the argument was really good and it was very convincing. Well, you might say, in that speech you just gave, what I really appreciated was the structure of your arguments. You made very clean, very specific claims, easy to grasp. You provided evidence that really effectively supported claims because the warrant for that evidence was outstanding, and you expressed what the warrant was. So we could take a claim and we could really evaluate it on its merits. You made that easy for us. Next time you give a speech, do that again because it really works. That's issuing a strength. And again, you can see how this sneaks into the territory of positive feedback. But I don't like to use that kind of terminology. And in the department, little by little, you are hearing more about strengths and deltas. And so I wanted to introduce the concept. Now, when you're issuing strengths and deltas, there are just a couple of practical behaviors that you need to keep in mind in order to issue strengths and deltas effectively. One is be very specifically descriptive. So for me to say to you after a speech, good job on that speech. Yeah, that's nice to hear. It's usually fun to be able to say that to someone, but it doesn't really help you if you just gave the speech. It doesn't help you to know what specifically you did a good job with. Was it my volume? Was it my arguments? Was it my gestures? What was good about the job that I did in the speech? So I want to be specific, as I demonstrated. I really like the argument. Or I might say, in the speech you just gave, your gestures, I thought, were particularly effective. You timed and managed the flow of the gestures to perfectly match up with the words you were saying. So there was a kind of a natural congruence between word and gesture. That really works very well. Keep that the next time you give a speech. That would be issuing a strength. And I'm being very specifically descriptive. So next time you give a speech, okay, I'm rehearsing my speech. My gestures are not particularly well timed with the words I'm saying. I got to make sure I do that. So that helps you in preparing your speech the next time you give a speech. Same thing with a delta. I might say, I noticed when you gave the speech, you used the word or quite a bit. Like that. You use the word or quite a bit. I would suggest that in the future, you simply don't say anything. Use it as a moment of silence. Use that moment of silence as a pause, which will be appreciated by the audience. So that would be an example of issuing a delta. And I'm very specific. I'm talking about ums or uhs. I'm talking about here's a possible solution to consider doing the next time. So be descriptive. Second is you want to avoid being sarcastic, sardonic, no eye rolling, no mocking. You can do that with your friends in informal sorts of situations. I don't care about that. But in the alternative frame of a professional encounter, feedback given for professional development purposes, I would avoid, everything from the eye roll to the sarcastic comment. So I wouldn't say something like, "Oh, dude, your claims really sucked." I would avoid that. Instead, I would give the strength. I'd issue the strength. Or for the delta, I would not say something like, quite often when you were speaking, you were saying or all the time. It made you look like you were a stumble bum. I mean, dude, come on. No, let's not go off into the rabbit hole of insults. Let's just keep it very straight ahead, very descriptive. Neutral or objective might be another word to use here. And issue a delta that way. Look the person in the eye, address the person by name, issue the delta, and if it's descriptive and it is without sarcasm or anything like that, it's going to be heard and it will be taken much more seriously than if you are abusive, insulting, or sarcastic or anything like that. What you want to do is have the person be resourceful as he or she receives the delta. And that also applies to receiving the strength. You want the person to take in the strength. You don't want the person to be going, "Oh, no, I wasn't that good." You don't need that kind of stuff. Third thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure that when you're issuing strengths and deltas, you remember that it's the person who's receiving the delta. It's his or her choice to accept, to embrace, to welcome the strength or delta that you issue. It's always his or her final option to accept or not the delta or the strength that you're issuing. So the ball's in his or her court. And you have to detach yourself from emotional investment in whether or not the person, quote, accepts what you said. You want to realize that, it's that person's call. So you have to come from a place, and this is the third thing to keep in mind. You have to originate, your comment has to originate in a real commitment to empathically or compassionately wanting to support that person. Issuing strengths and deltas is not a time to suck up to someone or to snipe at someone. It's an occasion where you are committing yourself to empathically, compassionately, and supportively expressing your reaction to someone's communication choices. And again, in a larger frame of professional development, this is crucial. Yes, it's true that if you issue strengths, that person may respond to you differently than if you issue deltas. But all that really means is you just have to make sure that when you issue deltas, you do so in a way that's going to maintain that's going to construct the kind of relationship results you want to construct with that person. You remember from from an earlier lecture, we talked about content results and relationship results. Okay, so that's strengths and deltas. Second topic we covered today was the topic of, oh my gosh, I'm blanking out. Hold on, let me take a cup of coffee, see if I can remember. Yes, I do remember. Today, the second topic we covered was really a long introduction into talking about media. And that long introduction was a period of time, a few minutes, in which I talked about what's called the constitutive approach to communication, the constitutive perspective, I should say, on communication. So the constitutive perspective on communication, we've sort of played with that a little bit. We've touched on it a little bit this semester thus far. The constitutive perspective on communication suggests that any social phenomenon you care to name can fundamentally be described or defined using communication-oriented thinking and terminology. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, let's make sure we understand what I mean by a social phenomenon. A social phenomenon, by the way, that's singular. Phenomenon is singular, phenomena is plural. They are not synonyms. One is singular, one's plural. A social phenomenon, we could also call it an interactional phenomenon. A social phenomenon is an event, a condition, an episode, a situation that is fundamentally social or interactional in nature, meaning it's two or more people who are in some way doing something together. So, a relationship is an interactional phenomenon. A relationship is two people, two humans, who are engaging in some ongoing, usually ongoing if it's an intimate, if it's toward the intimate side of the spectrum. It may be extremely short term if it's toward the instrumental side of the spectrum of human relationships. But a relationship is two human beings who are engaged in managing mutual responding and thereby construct a connection. Well, that's a social phenomenon. It's two people who are doing stuff together. Maybe it's short term and they do it once and never again, or it's maybe long term, it happens again and again in patterned ways or surprising ways, but it's an ongoing encounter. Either way, a relationship is a social phenomenon. A team, a group, small group, social phenomenon. Because what is a team other than a bunch of people who come together and do stuff? What is a small group except a bunch of people who come together and do stuff? And the stuff they do can be described in communication-oriented terms exclusively. So, let's go back to the concept here, the constitutive approach to communication. The constitutive approach to communication says that, oddly enough, we talk about communication and we talk about social phenomena as if they are material things. You know, we talk about a relationship that is not working as if it's a machine that's broken. We talk about a team that is functioning very well as if it's, a clock that is well oiled. But really, that's not what's going on. What's going on is, in the first example, the relationship that, quote, is not working. The relationship that's broken and needs to be fixed. What's really going on there is the two participants in that relationship, the members who are constructing the relationship, one or both are making a series of communication choices that are not yielding the kind of results that at least one of the people wants. The content and relationship results constructed by the two participants in that relationship are, for one reason or other, unwelcome, unsatisfying, and therefore indicate that ineffective communication choices have been made by at least one, if not both, of the participants in that relationship. Well, all of that is a way of describing a relationship that is or is not satisfying. All we've done is relied on communication-oriented terms. We haven't talked about the relationship as if it's something that is good or bad. We haven't talked about it in terms of, needs to be fixed or is working well. We haven't had to do that. All we've had to do is describe the communication practices by which the relationship is constructed and do a sort of an analysis of those communication choices made by one partner or both. And voila, we've just described the social phenomenon called a relationship using exclusively communication-oriented terms. And one of the things I said in lecture today, which we can't do right now because there's only me here, but one of the things we talked about today in lecture was I asked the students, I said, look, propose to me some social phenomenon that you think can't be described in communication-oriented terms. And in class and after class, students came up with some pretty good examples that, gosh, you almost stumped me. Here's one that I thought was interesting. Someone after class said, you ask us to try to stump you with a social phenomenon that couldn't be described in communication terms. What about boxing? Prize fighting? Well, yes, that is absolutely describable in exclusively communication-oriented terms. First of all, the two prize fighters in the ring, you can describe what's going on in the ring by talking about how they are or are not at certain distances from each other. Now, on one hand, distance is like, sure, that's a word you can use for anything. But in communication, it actually has a technical meaning. In nonverbal communication, we talk about a concept called space management, which means how much or how little space you put between yourself and someone else when you are talking. In a group, how much or little space you put between yourself and others in the group. And the term we hear all the time, social distancing. Actually, the phrase social distance has a very particular meaning in the world of communication studies. Space management is a nonverbal communication code, a nonverbal communication channel. And social distance literally means putting 6 to 8 feet between you and another person when you are managing mutual responding. And it's no accident that social distancing in the COVID era is, 6 feet apart. In Europe, when I was there earlier in the spring, in the year when COVID struck over there, the social distancing was 1.5 meters. Well, that's equivalent to about 6 feet or so. It's no accident that that's called social distancing, really, because in the world of nonverbal communication, social distance is the label for space that is 6 to 8 feet between two people who are interacting with one another, or among 3 or more people who are in a small group interacting with one another. Social, also called professional distance, social or professional distance, 6 to 8 feet, is the space you maintain, for example, when you're in an interview. If you go in for an interview, you're probably going to come into a room, and a person's going to be sitting on one side of a desk, and you're going to be sitting on the other side of the desk. You're going to be roughly 6 feet apart. Maybe a little bit closer, but you're going to be roughly 6 to 8 feet apart, especially if it's in a large office. If the person's sitting behind his or her work desk, if you go into the lunchroom and you sit down at a lunch table, you're going to be in closer distance than social distance. That's another label. But the point is, boxers generally are in what's called personal distance or intimate distance. Personal distance is 2 to 4 feet. Intimate distance is, let me start over again. Personal distance is 18 inches to 2 feet, 4 feet. I'm getting my distances a little bit mixed up, so don't quote me on the exact distance, but get the idea that I'm pointing to. And intimate distance is body contact to 18 inches apart. Well, prize fighters, when they are in the ring, they are in intimate distance. Sometimes they're clinching. They got their arms wrapped around each other for a break. If they want to take a break, and along comes the referee, and he pulls them apart because you're not supposed to take a break except when the rounds end. And then they're in personal distance when they're striking each other. When they're evading each other, they get to the limits of personal distance. At the beginning of the fight, they start out in what's called public distance, which is 12 feet or more apart. They're in their opposite corners, and they come closer from public distance into social or professional distance, into personal and intimate distance, ultimately, to do their work. The referee is in there. He or she is talking, I don't know how much or how little talk occurs between prize fighters. I just don't know the sport well enough. But assuming there's some trash talk going on, especially in a clinch, that's happening. So striking someone, well, that's actually a variation on the nonverbal communication code of touch. If I strike someone, if I'm a prize fighter, left to the jaw, a right uppercut, whatever it is, that's a variation on the nonverbal practice of touch. And so everything that happens in the social or interactional phenomenon called a prize fight can be described in communication-oriented terms. And this is looking at communication from the constitutive perspective, which says, as I said before, that all social phenomena, interactional phenomena, can be fully and completely and effectively described by using communication-oriented terminology. And therefore we say communication constitutes, creates, builds, constructs, makes these social phenomena. A team is constituted by and through communication practices. A relationship is constituted by and through communication practices. A company is constituted by and through communication practices. So that's the constitutive perspective on communication. And now to the third topic. That was an introduction to be able to say the new topic we're going to look at is technology and media, more particularly media. We have to do that by taking a communication grounded approach to understanding what media is. And we all love media. We all love our social media. We all love our smartphones. We all love our tablets and laptops. Media, media, media. We're all about media. Love it. Hate it. Love it. Whatever. But we have to talk about it as communication majors. We have to talk about it in formal professional settings, like the communication classroom, like professional settings with other communication specialists from other universities. We have to talk about it in a manner that's going to ground and reground ourselves in our discipline of communication. How you want to talk about it informally with your buds in your apartment, that's your business. But when we talk about communication in class, media in class and in other professional settings, you have to talk about it in a communication grounded way. And by the way, the beauty of the constitutive approach to communication is by defining social phenomena, interactional phenomena, solely in communication terms. What that means is you can participate in those phenomena in an effective, resourceful manner, because all you have to do is decide that you're going to make changes in your communication choices that will enable you to be an effective contributor in those social interactional episodes, settings. If you believe that your voice is not being heard in the company where you're working, and you have a constitutive view of what a company even is, you will be able to resourcefully say to yourself, well, gee, my voice isn't being heard. What that really means is I'm not making choices that ensure or enable my voice to be heard. I've got to make some different choices as a communicator in order to contribute differently in the frame of my company. And that in and of itself is going to change the way in which the company is constituted. It's going to be constituted by a whole bunch of different communication interactions because I'm making different communication choices. Well, we have to think about media in similar terms. How can we start to describe media solely in communication-oriented terms? And, you may think, well, that's pretty easy. I mean, media is all about communication. Well, okay, maybe so. What does that actually mean? The way to start doing this is to start with the concept of technology. Technology has been defined in communication-oriented terms. The famous name that is associated with this is Marshall McLuhan. He's not the only name. His is not the only name associated, but he's probably the most famous one of all the names. And I didn't mention that in class. I just didn't happen to get to that. Doesn't matter. Technology is a word we use to describe any... Sorry, I just don't want to get something out of my screen here. Technology is our term for objects that do what's called extend the human organism. Now, what do we mean by extending the human organism? Well, okay, so we're born into this world. Most of us have most or all of the appendages that humans typically have, 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes, vocal apparatus, eyes, ears, etc. Most of us are born into the world with functioning appendages, functioning organs. There are some differences and departures from that, of course. But we have these capacities to do things with our bodies. I can grasp for something and hold it in my hand. I can ask for something from someone. I can accomplish these tasks by using the tools, if you will. The affordances is a more technical name for these capacities. The affordances, the resources that I bring into the world just on my body, with my body. Well, okay, so if you and I are standing 2 feet apart and I ask you, can I borrow $1? Fair enough. You're either going to say yes or no. You're either going to pull your wallet out and give me $1 or not. But let's say that you're standing on the other side of a valley. And I'm standing on one hill and you're standing on another hill. And I want to borrow $1. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to yell, hey, can I borrow $1? But what if it's just far enough that you can't hear me? I've got to somehow extend the human organism to enable you to hear me. So maybe I pick up a megaphone. And a megaphone, if you don't know the term, a megaphone is usually about 1 foot or 2 feet long. And it's got a small open end on one end, and it flares open to a large open end on the other end. You see these in sporting events sometimes still. And I talk into the small end, and my voice is amplified through the wide end. So I pick up my megaphone and I talk into it, and I shout across the valley, hey, can I borrow $1? And you on the other end of the valley, you pick up your megaphone and shout back to me through the megaphone, sure, yeah, I'll get over there tomorrow. Well, we've just managed mutual responding beyond what our bodies could accomplish for us. We needed to have something to extend the human capacity to talk over distance, to talk and be heard over distance. We extended the human organism. Think about what a bullhorn is. A bullhorn is just a kind of a electronic variation on the megaphone, a little fancier version of a megaphone. If I have a bullhorn, I can do the same thing I just did with a megaphone. I just can maybe increase the distance over which I can extend the human organism. Pardon me. And what this does is we do what's called amplify and complement the extant inventory of human means. We amplify and complement the extant inventory of human means. What does that mean? Let's look at the words. Extant means existing. And in this particular case, we just mean what your body can do on its own, without any tools, without any technology. That's extant, the existing, whatever it is. Amplify and complement. Well, amplify means to increase, to make more of, to complement, P-L-E-M-E-N-T, not I. To complement means to kind of add to, enhance. So to amplify and complement the extant inventory of human means, okay, to increase and add to the existing inventory of human means. What's that mean? All right, so human means, that's just another way of saying human capacities, human resources, human strengths, human affordances, stuff that humans can do, human means. And then inventory of human means, the long list of what those means are. And it's a very long list of what we can do that's much more impressive than the inventory of means for other critters. Now, all fairness, a bird may have a smaller inventory of human means, but what a bird can do, we have to spend billions of dollars doing, i.e., a bird can flap its wings and start flying. We can't do that unless we spend billions of dollars developing an aircraft. Bats. I don't mean baseball bats, but bats like the flying mice, flying rats. A bat can't do a heck of a lot. A bat cannot write a poem. A bat cannot um, um, make an Oscar winning film. But a bat can do something that we can't, which is it can go in the dark and fly around and not bump into stuff. We can't walk across our living room in the dark without bumping into a chair, tripping over, a pair of shoes we parked there. You know, we don't have that we don't have that means. We got to spend hundreds of dollars on lighting if we want to do what a bat can do, just popping out a mama bat. So this is what we mean by technology extends the human organism by amplifying and complementing the extant inventory of human means. And we have to start there because media is really a technology that extends the human capacity to communicate specifically. So what do I mean by that a little bit? Well, let's imagine, let's go back like 3 million years to a place in Eastern Africa called the Olduvai Gorge. And some number of decades ago, a discovery was made in the Olduvai Gorge. And the discovery was this great big rock. And it looked shaped. Didn't look like a natural rock. Well, doing some studies and some thinking and some investigating, anthropologists came to the conclusion this rock was actually used to make smaller rocks into flints, tools, arrowheads, whatever. So this rock was actually a tool. It extended the human capacity to make tools. It was a tool used to make tools. Well, okay, fair enough. Think now about what an axe is, or what a chainsaw is, or what a jackhammer is. All of these are the same kind of thing. They're tools that are used to accomplish that which you couldn't do just with your hands and fingers. If I wanted to make a sharp tool to poke into grass in the Olduvai Gorge 3 million years ago, I couldn't poke into the grass with just my hands and fingers. It was maybe too dry. So I had to have some kind of a tool to do it, and I'd have this big rock, and I would take this rock to make, smaller rocks, chipping away at the smaller rocks to make a point that would be able to stick into the ground. And that would be me using technology or a tool. Well, let me start over again. Media is just technology used to extend and expand the human capacity to communicate. And we call a medium, we use the word media to talk about many of these tools. Medium is the word we use for just one of these tools. So let's stop at about that point for now. That's about where we stop today. The point of all of this is to start thinking of technology and media as extensions of the human organism. Specifically, media is an extension of the human organism when that human organism is looking to communicate effectively in a manner that just cannot be accomplished by using only the human means that are represented by the human body in and of itself. So if I want to reach out to 1,000 friends, I can't do that instantaneously by shouting or any other means. I have to use some kind of technological process to extend, amplify, complement the human capacity to communicate. So I pick up my smartphone and I send out, a live stream to Facebook or whatever. So that's a good place to stop. And I will see you all on Thursday.